Hi there, I'm Patch, and you'll be reading with me today. Today we're going to be reading Night Shift by Stephen King. Did you know that Night Shift is actually a series of short stories? Is everybody ready? Great! Now, let's settle down, grab some cocoa, and let's begin. Children of the Corn. Bert turned the radio on too loud and didn't turn it down because they were on the verge of another argument and he didn't want it to happen. He was desperate for it to not happen. Vicky said something. "What?" he shouted. "Turn it down! Do you want to break my eardrums?" He bit down hard on what might have come through his mouth and turned it down. Vicky was fanning herself with her scarf even though the T-Bird was air-conditioned. "Where are we anyway?" "Nebraska." She gave him a cold, neutral look. "Yes, Bert, I know we're in Nebraska, Bert, but where the hell are we?" "You've got the road atlas, look it up, or can't you read?" Such wit. This is why we got off the turnpike, so we could look at 300 miles of corn, and enjoy the wit and wisdom of Bert Robson. He was gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. He decided he was holding it that tightly because if he loosened up, why, one of those hands might just fly off and hit the ex-prom queen beside him right in the chops. "We're saving our marriage," he told himself. "Yes, we're doing it the same way us grunts went about saving villagers in the war." "Vicky," he said carefully, "I have driven 1,500 miles on turnpikes since we left Boston. I did all that driving myself because you refused to drive. Then—" "I did not refuse," Vicky said hotly. "Just because I get migraines when I drive for a long time. Then when I asked you if you'd navigate for me on some of the secondary roads, you said, 'Sure, Bert.' Those were your exact words. 'Sure, Bert.' Then, sometimes I wonder how I ever wound up married to you. By saying 2 little words." She stared at him for a moment, white-lipped, then picked up the road atlas. She turned the pages savagely. It had been a mistake leaving the turnpike, Bert thought morosely. It was a shame, too, because up until then they had been doing pretty well, treating each other almost like human beings. It had sometimes seemed that this trip to the coast, ostensibly to see Vicky's brother and his wife, but actually a last-ditch attempt to patch up their own marriage, was going to work. But since they left the turnpike, it had been bad again. How bad? Well, terribly, actually. "We left the turnpike at Hamburg, right?" "Right." "There's nothing more until Gatlin," she said. 20 miles, wide place in the road. You suppose we could stop there and get something to eat? Or does your almighty schedule say we have to go until 2 o'clock like we did yesterday?" He took his eyes off the road to look at her. "I've about had it, Vicky. As far as I'm concerned, we can turn around right here and go home and see that lawyer you wanted to talk to. Because this isn't working at—" She had faced forward again, her expression stonily set. It suddenly turned to surprise and fear. "Bert, look out! You're going to—" He turned his attention back to the road just in time to see something vanish under the T-Bird's bumper. A moment later, while he was only beginning to switch from gas to brake, he felt something bump sickeningly under the front and then the back wheels. They were thrown forward as the car braked along the center line, decelerating from 50 to 0 along black skid marks. "A dog," he said. "Tell me it was a dog, Vicky." Her face was pallid, cottage cheese color. "A boy, a little boy. He just ran out of the corn and— Congratulations, Tiger." She fumbled the car door open, leaned out, and threw up. Bert sat straight behind the T-Bird's wheel, hands still gripping it loosely. He was aware of nothing for a long time but the rich, dark smell of fertilizer. Then he saw that Vicky was gone, and when he looked in the outside mirror he saw her stumbling clumsily back toward a heaped bundle that looked like a pile of rags. She was ordinarily a graceful woman, but now her grace was gone. Robbed. "It's manslaughter. That's what they call it. I took my eyes off the road." He turned the ignition off and got out. The wind rustled softly through the growing man-high corn, making a weird sound like respiration. Vicky was standing over the bundle of rags now, and he could hear her sobbing. He was halfway between the car and where she stood, and something caught his eye on the left. A gaudy splash of red amid all the green, as bright as barn paint. He stopped, looking directly into the corn. He found himself thinking, anything to untrack from those rags that were not rags, that it must have been a fantastically good growing season for corn. They grew close together, almost ready to bear. You could plunge into those neat, shaded rows and spend a day trying to find your way out again. But the neatness was broken here. Several tall corn stalks had been broken and leaned askew. And what was that further back in the shadows? "Bert!" Vicky screamed at him. "Don't you want to come see? So you can tell all your poker buddies that you bagged in Nebraska? Don't you?" But the rest was lost in fresh sobs. Her shadow was puddled starkly around her feet. It was almost noon. Shade closed over him as he entered the corn. The red barn paint was blood. There was a low, somnolent buzz as flies lit, tasted, and buzzed off again, maybe to tell others. There was more blood on the leaves further in. Surely it couldn't have splattered this far. And then he was standing over the object he had seen from the road. Picked it up. The neatness of the rows was disturbed here. Several stalks were canted drunkenly. 2 of them had been broken clean off. The earth had been gouged. It was blood. The corn rustled. With a little shiver, he walked back to the road. Vicky was having hysterics, screaming unintelligible words at him, crying, laughing. Who would have thought it could end in such a melodramatic way? He looked at her and saw he wasn't having an identity crisis or a difficult life transition or any of those trending things. He hated her. He gave her a hard slap across the face. She stopped short and put a hand against the reddening impression of his fingers. "You'll go to jail, Bert," she said sullenly. "I don't think so," he said, and put the suitcase he had found in the corn at her feet. "What? I don't know. I guess it belonged to him." He pointed to the sprawled, face-down body that laid in the road. No more than 13, from the look of him. The suitcase was old. The brown leather was battered and scuffed. 2 hanks of clothesline had been wrapped around it and tied in large, clownish grannies. Vicky bent to undo one of them, and saw the blood greased into the knot and withdrew. Bert knelt and turned the body over gently. "I don't want to look," Vicky said, staring down helplessly anyway. And when the staring, sightless body flopped up to regard them, she screamed again. The boy's face was dirty, his expression a grimace of terror. His throat had been cut. Bert got up and put his arms around Vicky as she began to sway. "Don't faint," he said very quietly. "Do you hear me, Vicky? Don't faint." He repeated it over and over, and at last she began to recover and held him tight. They might have been dancing, there on the noon-struck road with the boy's corpse at their feet. "Vicky?" "What?" Muffled against his shirt. "Go back to the car and put the keys in your pocket. Get the blanket out of the back seat and my rifle. Bring them here." "The rifle?" "Someone cut his throat. Maybe whoever's watching us." Her head jerked up and her wide eyes considered the corn, and marched away as far as the eye could see, undulating up and down small dips and rises of the land. "I imagine he's gone. But why take the chances? Go on, do it." She walked stiltedly back to the car, her shadow following, a dark mascot who stuck close at this hour of the day. When she leaned into the back seat, Bert squatted beside the boy. White male, no distinguishing marks. "Run over, yes, but the T-bird hadn't cut the kid's throat. It had been cut raggedly and inefficiently. No army sergeant had shown the killer the finer points of hand-to-hand assassination. But the final effect had been deadly. He had either run or had been pushed through the last 30 feet of corn, dead or mortally wounded, and Bert Robson had run him down. If the boy had still been alive when the car hit him, His life had been cut short by 30 seconds at most. Vicky tapped him on the shoulder and he jumped. She was standing with the brown army blanket over her left arm, the case-pumped shotgun in her right hand, her face averted. He took the blanket and spread it on the road. He rolled the body onto it. Vicky uttered a desperate little moan. "You okay?" He looked up at her. "Vicky?" "Okay," she said in a strangled voice. He flipped the sides of the blanket over the body and scooped it up, hating the thick, dead weight of it. It tried to make a U in his arms and slither through his grasp. He clutched it tighter and they walked back to the T-bird. "Open the trunk," he grunted. The trunk was full of travel stuff, suitcases and souvenirs. Vicky shifted most of it into the back seat, and Bert slipped the body into the made space and slammed the trunk lid down. A sigh of relief escaped him. Vicky was standing by the driver's side door, still holding the cased rifle. "Just put it in the back and get in." He looked at his watch and saw only 15 minutes had passed. It seemed like hours. "What about the suitcase?" she asked. He trotted back down the road to where it stood on the white line, like the focal point in an impressionist painting. He picked it up by its tattered handle and paused for a moment. He had a strong sensation of being watched. It was a feeling he had read about in books, mostly cheap fiction, and he had always doubted its reality. Now he didn't. It was as if there were people in the corn, maybe a lot of them, coldly estimating whether the woman could get the gun out of the case and use it before they could grab him, drag him into the shady rows, cut his throat. Heart beating thickly, he ran back to the car, pulled the keys out of the trunk lock, and got in. Vicky was crying again. Bert got them moving, and before a minute had passed, he could no longer pick out the spot where it had happened in the rearview mirror. "What did you say the next town was?" he asked. "Oh," she bent over the road atlas again. "Gatlin. We should be there in 10 minutes. Does it look big enough to have a police station?" "No, it's just a dot. Maybe there's a constable." They drove in silence for a while. They passed a silo on the left. Nothing else but corn. Nothing passed them going the other way. Not even a farm truck. "Have we passed anything since we got off the turnpike, Vicky?" She thought about it. "A car and a tractor at that intersection." "No, since we got on this road. Route 17. "No, I don't think we have. Earlier this might have been the preface to some cutting remark. Now she only stared out of her half of the windshield on the unrolling road and the endless dotted line. "Vicky, could you open the suitcase? Do you think it might matter?" "Don't know. It might." While she picked at the knots, her face was set in a peculiar way, expressionless but tight-mouthed, that Bert remembered his mother wearing when she pulled the innards out of the Sunday chicken. Bert turned on the radio again. The pop station they had been listening to was almost obliterated in static, and Bert switched, running the red marker slowly down the dial. Farm reports, Buck Owens, Tammy Wynette, all distant, nearly distorted into babble. Then, at the end of the dial, one single word blared out of the speaker so loud and clear that the lips which uttered it might have been directly beneath the grill of the dashboard speaker. "Atonement!" the voice bellowed. Bert made a surprising grunting sound. Vicky jumped. "Only by the blood of the Lamb are we saved." The voice roared, and Bert hurriedly turned the sound down. The station was close, all right. So close that, yes, there it was, poking out of the corn on the horizon, a spidery red tripod against the blue. A radio tower. "Atonement is the word, brothers and sisters," the voice told them, dropping to a more conversational pitch. In the background, off mic, voices murmured amen. "There's some that think it's okay to get out in the world, as if you could work and walk in the world without being smirched by the world. Now, is that what the Word of God teaches us?" Off mic, but still loud. "No! Holy Jesus! the evangelist shouted, and now the words came in a powerful pumping cadence, almost as compelling as a driving rock and roll beat. When they gonna know that way is death? When they gonna know what the wages of the world are paid on the other side? Huh? Huh? The Lord has said there's many mansions in his house, but there's no room for the fornicator, no room for the coveter, no room for the defiler of the corn, no room for the homosexual, no room. Vicky snapped it off. That drivel makes me sick. What did he say? Bert asked her. What did he say about corn? I didn't hear it. She was picking at the second clothesline knot. He said something about corn. I know he did. I got it, Vicky said, and the suitcase fell open in her lap. They were passing a sign that said, Gatlin 5 miles. Drive carefully, protect our children. The sign had been put up by the Elks. There were .22 bullet holes in it. Socks, Vicky said. 2 pairs of pants, a shirt, a belt, a string tie with a... She held it up, showing the peeling gilt neck clasp. Who's that? Bert glanced at it. Hopalong Cassidy, I think. Oh, she put it back. She was crying again.